Congratulations to the class of 2010. Etched in stone above the front door of Earl Hall are the words, "Erected for the students that religion and learning may go hand in hand and character grow with knowledge." This morning's baccalaureate service is evidence of our continuing aspiration in this regard. Welcome. Welcome to this multi-faith baccalaureate service.
A Man in His Life, a poem by Yehuda Amichai. A man doesn't have time in his life to have time for everything. He doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose. Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and to hate at the same moment, to laugh and to cry with the same eyes, with the same hands to throw stones and to gather them, to make love in war and war in love, to hate and forgive and remember and forget, to arrange and confuse, to eat and to digest what history takes years and years to do. A man doesn't have time. When he loses, he seeks. When he finds, he forgets. When he forgets, he loves. And when he loves, he begins to forget. And his soul is seasoned. His soul is very professional. Only his body remains forever an amateur. It tries and it misses, gets muddled, doesn't learn a thing, drunk and blind in its pleasures and its pains. He will die as figs die in autumn, shriveled and full of himself and sweet, the leaves growing dry on the ground, the bare branches pointing to the place where there is a time for everything. The modern Israeli poet, Yehuda Amichai, is known for his relentless criticism of what he saw as the crippling precepts of ancient texts. His poem is one of urgency, a poem about time. Amichai is responding to Ecclesiastes' famous words that begin, "For everything there is a season, a time to live and a time to die, a time to love and a time to hate." On the surface, it seems that Amichai is saying that Ecclesiastes is wrong, dated, and irrelevant, that its description of the seasons does not apply to our complex world. But in fact, Amichai's refutation revives the text. His argument breathes modern life into the ancient words, making Ecclesiastes inescapably relevant. In the end, Amichai's heresy is a deeply religious act. In Genesis, the patriarch Jacob's name was changed to Israel, Yisrael, meaning, "and he wrestled with God." And this name becomes the name of the Jewish nation. Holy texts such as these are the DNA of Judaism. But as our name, Israel, suggests, we are encouraged to wrestle with them. We are encouraged to argue with them, the way you might argue with a beloved but difficult family member. In spite of indignance and exasperation, we seek to strengthen the bond out of commitment and loyalty. Amichai's message is particularly applicable to today as we prepare to enter a new phase of our lives. We do have the ability to deal with ambiguity and with opposition, and we must. If we run away from gray towards black and white utopias, we will inevitably destroy and be destroyed. So today, with the help of Ecclesiastes and Amichai, I remind myself, and you, my friends, that we must not be afraid of the ambiguities of life. We must embrace shades of gray. We must wrestle with our ancient texts and make them our own so that they will guide us through these complex but wondrous seasons.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2010 Baccalaureate service, and thank you. As we all know, we are living in a time of great change and advancement, but we're also living in a time of conflict. The world continues to get smaller, and our country grows in diversity day by day. In such times, how are we to go about as a global society, one that works for the advancement of the human species as a whole? Nowadays, I know that certain individuals love to mock and bash religion. They say that religion is the cause of most of our ills, and that getting rid of religion would solve most of our problems. While I emphatically say that they are wrong, while it's true that many have twisted the scriptures for their own corrupt agendas, I firmly believe that the solutions to many of our problems lie in the core ideas that sustain our religious traditions. In Judaism, the Talmud highlights the value of human life when it says, "Whoever destroys a soul, it is considered as if he destroyed an entire world. And whoever saves a life, it is considered as if he saved an entire world." When we look at Islam, the Quran tells us that diversity and differences amongst people is a part of the divine plan. O mankind, we have created you all out of a male and a female, and have made you into nations and tribes, so that you might come to know one another. Verily, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is most deeply conscious of him. Behold, God is all-knowing, all-aware. In the end, we are all interconnected, we're all here for a reason, for a purpose, and we must live in a world of mutual respect. In the chaos of modern life, we tend to forget the truly important things, like love, family, and caring for one another. As the Quran says again, you cannot attain to righteousness until you give to charity from the possessions you love. Whatever you give to charity, God is fully aware thereof. We cannot be considered righteous if we do not think of others besides ourselves. In an era of excessive individualism, it's refreshing to see that our traditions are pointing us in a more noble direction. For loving God is akin to loving your fellow man. As Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Whatever we want for ourselves, we must want for others. If we seek truth and justice, we must not seek it just for ourselves, but for all people. It is important to remember that now, more than ever, these values don't just constitute the way of any one religion, but they also, above all, constitute the American way. Once again, I thank you and have a blessed day.
Leaving the comfort of our homes, we came to Barnard and Columbia a little under 4 years ago. Many of us were unsure of who our friends would be, which activities we would join, and ultimately who we would become. After dance parties in Brooks 4, our yearly holy paint bagging sessions, and realizing that I'm a huge economics nerd, most of my questions had been answered. I'm still left wondering what it'll be like to actually grow up. For those of you who have known me throughout the years, you've heard me joke about always wanting to stay a kid. But in a few days' time, I will have to face my fears and become a real person, one with a real apartment and a real job who lives far away from the world that has become our home, this campus. As I embark on this journey, I keep the following passages from the Hindu religious texts, the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, in mind. This world is the field of action. Action, therefore, is applauded here. Be fearless and pure. Never waver in your determination or your dedication. Give freely. Be self-controlled, sincere, truthful, loving, and full of the desire to serve. Learn to be disciplined and take joy in selfless acts. Do not get angry or harm any living creature, but be compassionate and gentle. Show goodwill to all. Cultivate vigor, patience, will, and morality. Avoid malice and pride. Then you will achieve your destiny. Morality is well practiced by the good. Morality, however, is always afflicted by two things. That is, the desire of profit, entertained by those who covet it, and the desire for pleasure, cherished by those who are wedded to it. Whoever, without afflicting morality and profit, or morality and pleasure, or pleasure and profit, follows all three, morality, profit, and pleasure, always succeeds in obtaining great happiness. As we leave the comforts of this community, we become wholly responsible for ourselves, and our actions become all the more important. I hope you found these passages as inspiring as I did, and will let them forever resonate in your minds. I would like to thank my parents for their unconditional love and support, and especially for their guidance in searching for these passages. I am grateful to have had the opportunity to share this moment with you all, and wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors and in obtaining great happiness. Thank you.
The following passage, taken from the 13th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, is often called the parable of the sower. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables, saying, "A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep, and when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The disciples approached him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He said to them in reply, "Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted. To anyone who has, more will be given, and he will grow rich. From anyone who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because they look but do not see, and hear but do not listen or understand. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. Amen, I say to you,
Many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Hear then the parable of the sower. The seed sown on the path is the one who hears the word of the kingdom without understanding it, and the evil one comes and steals away what was sown in his heart. The seed sown on rocky ground is the one who hears the word and receives it at once with joy. But he has no root and lasts only for a time. When some tribulation or persecution comes because of the world, he immediately falls away. The seed sown among thorns is the one who hears the word, but then worldly anxiety and the lure of riches choke the word, and it bears no fruit. But the seed sown on rich soil is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields 100 or 60 or 30-fold. The gospel of the Lord. In this parable, Jesus tells us what must become of the truth we have received. It needs to grow and be fruitful. We have to be like the good soil, eager to receive God's word. Our pursuit of the truth cannot stop here at our Columbia graduation. It must be a lifelong search that is constantly aided by our religious beliefs. I chose this passage because I believe it delivers a universal message. True faith bears fruit. Among those fruits are social justice, community, even the university itself. But without that root of faith, the branches, all our efforts, wither and die. Though it is often difficult to talk about faith with our peers on this campus or to stand up for what we believe in times of adversity, in doing so, we may be scattering seeds that may bear good fruit in the future.
morning, dear graduates and guests. Of all the ways I could characterize my experiences at Columbia, the one word I would use is perhaps unlikely. Unlikely journeys, unlikely circumstances, unlikely people. But for all that, I believe we have become better and stronger people for it. I came to Columbia from Brooklyn, having had no religious upbringing. I took a work-study job here at Office of the University Chaplain, hoping to make ends meet. What I found instead was a family of administrators devoted to religious life in the middle of urban America. The characters here were eclectic. Buddhist monks meditating in the basement of this very building. We had Muslim students organizing campus-wide break of fasts, and also intervarsity Christian rock and roll. The OUC's commitment to diversity would in many ways reflect my own personal journey. When I eventually joined WKCR-FM New York, the radio station on campus that broadcasts to all of the tri-state area, I brought with me the same temperament and gentleness that this very space embodies. I took a chance at studying traditional musics from all over the world, both commercial and obscure, and it's taken me to places that I never thought I'd end up, and has brought me back full circle home. In fact, I believe it is this willingness to take chances, unlikely chances, that defines our institution. We took a chance with Ahmadinejad. We took a chance with amendment protests. And for good reasons or bad, what matters is that we have grown. Our speaker here today is a champion of many unlikely forces. Born to a minister mother in Missouri, she became the first African American and youngest president of Planned Parenthood. She had obtained a master's degree in infant care and nurse midwifery from Columbia at a time when it was still uncommon to do so. She has been named among the world's most beautiful people by People and Harper's Bazaar magazines, and has contributed to a wide range of cultural and political topics on Oprah, the New York Times, HBO, and many others. Since 1995, she has served on the Board of Trustees here at Columbia, where her advisory role aided projects as various as Manhattansville and the Mind-Brain Behavior Project at the medical school. When we first spoke, I was so inspired by her grace and civility and how closely she understood the pulse of this university. I hope you will feel the same. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Ms. Faye Waddleton.
Thank you for that very generous introduction, and welcome to graduates on this, your beginning commemoration and justly deserved celebration. I'm delighted to have been asked to be the speaker today and to share with you the journeys that I have made and that of others, which I hope will be an example as you move into a world that is less sheltered and more demanding, in which you will make decisions on a daily basis from which this institution has prepared you to accept and to follow. In thinking about my remarks this morning, I was reminded of a story that was of a lesson that was given by a father to a son. And those of you who have heard now my background, you might wonder if I'm not suggesting that it should have been given to a daughter from a mother, but we'll get to the mother in a moment. But this son was about to embark upon a long journey and it was felt that he needed a little bit of instruction in terms of how he needed to see the world as he came up on various encounters. And the father said to the son, if you see a donkey carrying gold, don't say that it's a golden donkey, say that it's a donkey carrying gold. If you see a donkey carrying a diploma, don't say that it's an educated donkey. It's a donkey carrying a diploma. I don't mean that to be too closely aligned with what we're here today about. But if you see a man entering a holy city, don't say that it's a holy man. It's a man in a holy city. I believe that the moral of that lesson is to search beneath the surface for the deeper meaning of what is before you. From the surface of my upbringing, I suspect that most would have labeled me, given my background, as just a preacher's daughter. The deeper purpose, however, of my life is in the profession to which I chose to train. Now, my mother, a minister, I was a preacher's daughter who, my mother was the preacher in the family. My mother had the idea that I would become a missionary, but I didn't become the kind of missionary that she had envisioned, but I did become a nurse. And as such, it did not take me very far away from the core values of my fundamentalist teachings and upbringing. Over the years, it has been assumed that somehow I veered a long way away, and maybe your own parents will think that as you make choices in your life, that you have veered from their teachings. It was thought that maybe I was rebelling against my religious upbringing, or that I had no religious values at all, even though I believed in my heart and my soul that I remained close to the values of my mother's teachings of honesty, service, and standing up for my beliefs, even if it meant being persecuted. It was a journey that took me away from the rigid judgments toward the openness of compassion and tolerance. I traveled in the 50s with my parents to tent revivals, and I listened to my mother preach night after night, right from wrong, good and evil, heaven and hell, and her messages were not ambiguous, they were powerful. I sometimes didn't know where my mother stopped and where God began, or where God began and my mother stopped, but just to cover and hedge my bets, I went to the altar night after night to get saved, because I believe that every transgression could be erased by the confession, so I rushed to the altar, but somehow that saving me never quite took, much to my mother's aggravation. But I have come to understand and to even revere the qualities of my mother's teachings. For now I recognize that these are the roots of who I have become. I've come to appreciate how essential are beliefs and values to be held as an anchor in shaping who we become as citizens and ultimately who we are as people. In my mother's life and in her teachings, the lines were not fuzzy. More powerfully, through her actions, through the witness of her actions, I saw honesty, loyalty, integrity, respect, and compassion for others. I saw diligence and perseverance, and I saw faith, an unabiding faith in God. These became the anchors for the decisions that I make every day, large and small. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion are all of the traditions that we cherish in the liberties of this great country. And so I came to cherish those as well. For they are rights that have protected the traditions of our ancestors as well as our country. And so no matter how strong a force religion has been in shaping our lives, and it certainly was in my life, I have come to understand the importance of restraint about our religion. I grew up with someone who proselytized her religion, but I believe It is important never to impose those beliefs through the force of law. And while I implore you to recognize the sacredness of this freedom, the inestimable value of not being forced to bow down to the gods of others, and the uncompromising determination that is needed to protect this right, please do not allow the denial of our first liberty of the worship of the faith of the God of our faith to ever be the weapon of oppression. Now, I went off to college as an impressionable 16-year-old to prepare for a degree in nursing. I went with unbridled idealism, and as I see you sitting before me today, I think that was me 40 some years ago. I went with religious convictions, but they were soon tempered by a different prism. For the first time, I was faced with the earthly conditions of life, suffering, and death as I prepared to become a nurse. Over and over and over again, our professors said to us that the only thing that was really important was compassion and care, and those two qualities were not to be conditioned on our personal views. Every one of our patients was to be respected and treated with dignity. I suppose we could extend that to say that every one of our fellow citizens should be treated with respect and with dignity. I learned to serve people differently than the manner in which my mother's example of service had set. I did not need to share their moral or religious beliefs. Their lives were not the life that I had known or had been brought into. The hallmark of my profession was to be the substance of the care, not the judgment of my life choices or my views about my patients' life choices. My clinical experiences as a student midwife right here in this great institution of Columbia University landed me at Harlem Hospital, and I saw the devastating effects of poverty, substance abuse, unwanted children. The hope of a better life in the hereafter didn't seem to be quite as compelling as my mother had preached it, and it seemed that it was inadequate for to comfort those in the pain of the present. The magnetic force to prevent these circumstances from being visited upon the women of my generation and beyond has driven my life's work. For education, for choice, for prevention and safety, I came of age professionally, I came of age as an adult. With doctors and ministers and ordinary citizens, I saw the example of standing up for the freedoms that are so important and vital for every human being. So when I look at your world, it is a world of choices that I did not have in the 60s when I graduated. The freedom that you perhaps take for granted, rights that did not exist, were freedoms that freed you for self-determination. Those who resisted oppression made it possible for you to have the choices that you now enjoy. In the early 21st century, will you fully appreciate how important it is to accept the responsibility of protecting all that you have been given, because you have an obligation to do so? Good and responsible citizens is the challenge before you. I pray that you will never forget that you are the beneficiary of the struggles and the sacrifices of others. There's a story that I think illustrates the importance of the investment that we make in the present and how it comes to be in the future. In the 1920s, and it is as the introduction to my talk today presented me as the unlikely speaker perhaps in many ways, but in the 1920s, the city of Chicago was terrorized by the notorious Al Capone and his associates. Among them was one of the best attorneys in the country, and his name was Eddie O'Hare. They called him Easy Eddie. And even though Easy Eddie worked for Capone, he didn't much care for him. He was disgusted by the gangster's crimes and flashy lifestyle, and yes, he equated it with being Capone's lawyer, just doing his job. One afternoon, Eddie was working in his private office, and his teenage son came in from school bloodied and bruised. And Eddie asked his son what had caused those injuries, and his son did not respond, and this happened over a few days. And so his father decided to go to the school and secretly observe what was happening to his son. Immediately upon stepping into the school, he noticed that his son was set upon by a group that beat him viciously. And he knew his son was not a coward and could not understand why he didn't fight back. And so he, as would be the attitude or the reaction of most parents, decided that he was going to intervene to protect his son. Just then he heard one of the boys saying, "Capone has done so many evil things, yet your dad is helping him to get away with it. Every time we see you, we are reminded of our murdered fathers, uncles, and friends. Someone must pay for it, and so you are the one." At that moment, the father determined what was right and what was wrong in his work. In the next 3 years, he secretly gathered evidence against the gangster and submitted it to the government, which helped to convict Mr. Capone, not for his violent crimes, but for tax evasion. Shortly after this incident, and shortly after the conviction, Eddie O'Hara was gunned down. But in 1946, the city of Chicago expanded its airport, and on an autumn day in 1949, thousands gathered to celebrate a new facility dedicated to Butch O'Hare, a fallen World War hero, the son of Easy Eddie. And so I think that within the story of Easy Eddie is the lesson of what our life every day should be and in the investment that we are making in the future. Every day in life we will face, and we do face, and you will face, a fine line deciding what is right and what is wrong. These are precarious times, but they are also times of great opportunity. And you arrived at Columbia. There have been great strides that have been made since you came here. But despite these great strides, the gains remain precarious. I can't imagine that when you came here, we didn't have the iPod or the iPad. But there is still an unfinished agenda. The promise of a decent birth, a decent education, a decent health care, a decent quality of life, and a decent, compassionate death is indeed still a promise that is denied by too many of this country's citizens. You will enter a world in which the wage gap will open between men and women in your very first job. And if you choose to go on to achieve your MBA and to become a professional in business, the gap will not close. Throughout the career, the gap will remain open. And so it may be harder for you than it was for the time of my generation, those of my generation, because you have so many more choices and so many more opportunities to falter. But you have a privilege that carries a great big price tag: the obligation of service and the duty of courage and leadership. Your life possibilities will expand and shrink in direct proportion to the strength of your courage and the investment that you make. And will you be, as Robert F. Kennedy once stated, that he sees things and looks at things the way they are and asks why, and I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Will you be challenged to be good stewards of society, of community, of family, of self? To navigate your personal journey, you will be challenged to negotiate moral choices, to make personal sacrifices. It was said that when Martin Luther King was invited to become the head of the Montgomery Association, he didn't decline immediately because he said, "Let me think about it." And he said that if he had really thought about it for very long, he would have permanently declined. But he embraced the responsibility to make the promise of the Constitution for ever larger generations, for generations to come. And the course of modern history was thereby changed. When I have faced difficult choices, I've tried to remember my mother's clear lines. Their applicability to my contemporary life is not always easy to frame, and neither will it be for those lines that you divide and design and divide. But this I remember is that she lived by her values and her fervent belief that her cause could be won, that it may take time, it may even be painful, but nothing of value has been attained without struggle. So much is lost if we cannot summon the courage of our convictions. When there are times that the way does not seem clear for me, I am comforted by the words of the prophet Isaiah. They who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. In those instructions, I believe that the prophet is saying that through our patience we gain strength. They shall mount up with wings of eagles. They shall run and not be weary. Life is not a sprint, it is a marathon. They who wait upon the Lord will gain strength. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. The doors of opportunity have been opened wide, and as you enter, make sure that it matters that you were here on earth. For it is not the privilege which we are born, but what we make of our lives that counts. Thank you.
Good morning. When I was asked to give this family tribute, I was stunned. As an engineering student, I have not written an academic paper for about 6 months. But don't worry, I've been doing other rigorous academic work, I assure you, Dean Penmora and Mom and Dad. Ironically, as an engineering student, some of my most edifying assignments at Columbia were some of the essays I wrote. I think it was primarily that I put more time and care into them than the constant 6 problem sets I had to churn out each week on a sundry of topics, generally consisting of differential calculus, Laplace and Fourier transforms, electromagnetics, microelectronic circuits, the physics of solid-state semiconductor materials and devices, and computer programming. Many of these do sound challenging, that's why I chose to list them. However, there are many much more challenging classes I've chosen to omit because they would sound innocuous to one not educated in the art. Finally, I thought it was funny that one would be asked to reflect upon family at the very zenith of one's independence as responsibilities mount on the horizon. Growing up, you will meet and see many people's families, and you will begin to notice similarities between them. While I can see continuity between my friends' families and mine, there are clear distinctions. And as I grew older, I realized why I was different. There is almost a sense of belonging when I am with my family. The harbinger of this realization can be some of the most superficial things. Imagine standing out in almost every crowd you ever stood in. Imagine seeing Times Square in every direction above the millions of revelers during the New Year's Eve ball drop. The only times I've felt exceptionally tall are when I'm away from my family. I would not say I come from a typical family. A term I've always used to describe my family is interesting. I'm the second of 5 children. My father was an aerospace engineer who went on to become a corporate attorney. My mother, after a long career as a registered nurse, decided to stay home and raise the family. My older brother's given name is Alexander Hamilton Slanover, born the day of the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. My given name is Thomas Edison Slanover. I was born the day the light bulb was invented. And coincidentally, I'm an electrical engineer. My younger brother's given name is John Locke Slanover, just because my dad likes John Locke. My mother named my sisters because if my father did, at least one of them would have been named Margaret Thatcher. Concerning family or life in general, it is my view, as long as you're happy with the person you are, it was all for the better, and if not, you have the power to change that. As we have tentatively left our homes under the aegis of Columbia University, we began to form our own microcosm of society in the tradition of residential colleges beginning with Oxford in the 11th century, to imbue us with the qualities which enable us to become good citizens, individuals, or leaders, whatever happens to be the dictum of the day. It is self-evident that the life of a university student is transitory. However, I do think it's a unique time in one's life, and the university environment has some remarkable attributes. When again will you be living in a community where the population is nominally of the same age and of similar interest to you? As a child up until middle school, I would venture to guess your interpersonal relationships were based on geography and who your parents' friends were. Since then, these elements have waned in importance. However, as we leave university life, many of our new day-to-day relationships will tend to be a function of those we interact with on a professional basis, and again, geography. After commuting to Columbia for a period, I decided to move on campus, and upon university housing, I felt I just didn't fit in with dorm life. I was living in Shapiro 401. I was larger than the bed in every dimension, and could touch my hand and foot to opposite walls at the same time. Each summer during college, I worked as an engineer, which enabled me this year to live off campus for the first time. It was a bit frightening. For the first time, I was truly living on my own, paying all my own bills. However, there was a sense of pride at the end of the day. I could tell my parents were proud of me and that our relationship had changed. One marked change was that I stopped receiving unsolicited advice via the phone, and my parents were asking my permission insomuch as they wouldn't tell me what to do. One night recently, I took an early weekend and went to a friend's beach house, during which my father stayed in my apartment for one evening. Upon returning, every pet peeve of mine of the house I grew up in appeared in my home. For instance, a bar of Ivory soap was opened and placed by the sink, where there was one already in the shower tray, the only place I use it, and I was absolutely livid. As I sat down and thought about the situation, I thought to myself, wow, you know, my father had to put up with this for 20 years, and as a result, I understood him better. Furthermore, when my parents do something that bothers me, like growing grocery shopping for me and buying food I do not eat, or food I would never have time to cook, I know they have good intentions. I think of myself at 6 years old with my siblings, cooking my mom a Mother's Day breakfast, pancakes, eggs, coffee, the works. My mom took only 2 bites, and we thought we did the greatest thing ever. Growing up in a Catholic family, and as a Catholic, I was fortunate enough to have attended a Franciscan high school, which gave me a great education and strong formation. Periodically, after the morning prayer, they would have a student read inspirational words. One particular day was Mother Teresa's "Do It Anyway," which states, "People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten. Do good anyway. Will often be forgotten, I'm sorry. Give the best you have, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. In the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. Anyway, upon hearing these inspirational words, I thought to myself, you know what? That's great if you're Mother Teresa. However, recently I've come to realize that the knowledge you can do something may be more important than the evanescent fruits of that labor. Well, class of 2010, it's been great. Wherever life takes you, I wish you all the best. And finally, let us thank our families for enabling us to be here today.
Good morning. What time is it? Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by extending salams to everyone in attendance. As many of you may already know, Muslims greet one another by stating Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. It's customary to respond in kind by saying Wa alaikum assalam, which means upon you be peace. According to a series of Google searches, this custom arose as a means of identifying friends in a land where tribal warfare was a common occurrence. Salam was a means of finding friends among enemies and creating community from individuals. This greeting united people regardless of their previous affiliations and brought them together under a common faith. Today, Islam is the second largest religion in the world, but its members can still find commonality in this simple phrase. Standing here before you all, a little over 4 years since I tore open my admissions packet and proudly read the words, "Congratulations, you have been accepted to Columbia Class of 2010. I have been invited to reflect on what it has meant for me as a Muslim woman to be a part of this community. However, this proved to be more difficult than I had anticipated because for me, my experience has not been defined by any one characteristic or quality. That experience is something that is truly unique to the community here at Columbia, and I hope that you will see why by the end of my reflection. We as students come from all 50 states, scores of countries across the globe, every socioeconomic stratum, dozens of religions and spiritual affiliations, and a spectrum of political ideologies. But to call this population a melting pot would be to deny the strength and vivacity of the smaller micro-communities that make up the greater whole. I would like to invite you to see this campus the way that I see it, so try to imagine with me. As you step onto the campus through the gates at 116th, let the hustle and bustle of Broadway fade into the background. Sunlight shines through the trees along your path, and the cherry blossoms lining College Walk are an explosion of dusty pink against the bright green of new spring leaves. Faintly at first, but growing louder the further inward you walk, are the sounds of birds hidden somewhere in the trees, the first years chattering on their way to their Frontiers lecture, drums echoing across campus from the Matsuri performance on Low Plaza. These are the sights and sounds that make up the heartbeat of this campus. They are part of what makes Columbia the vibrantly diverse place and dynamic place that it is. I have worked with the admissions office for all 4 years of my time at Columbia, and one of the biggest questions that I'm asked from parents who want to know how such a really diverse campus community really interacts. They say they see groups of students sitting out on the steps on a sunny afternoon and instantly take note of the little clusters of white faces and little clusters of brown faces, and they grow concerned. Do the different groups of students ever clash, they ask me, and I always respond, absolutely. We are Columbia students after all. From the time we take our first steps onto campus, we're bred to analyze and debate previously held ideas while simultaneously struggling to defend our own convictions. In our seminars, we ponder and dispute the great texts that we may or may not have read before class, but must have an opinion on regardless. These communities extend past the classroom to the residence halls, where I represented Carmen 12 with all of my heart. Those parents saw grouped together were more likely to be there because they were in the same class, on the same team, or on the executive board of a cultural, political, or Greek organization than just because their faces happened to look similar. We are brought together in our micro-communities by deeper qualities, like our common interests, experiences, and goals. While these groups are unique in their own right, it is the times that they intersect that the true Columbia spirit emerges. One of the most polarizing events in our tenure here was the arrival of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in the fall of 2007. There were just as many of us who were outraged at his presence as there were those who defended his right to free speech. In contemporary civilizations, we read the works of Milton and Voltaire, but the real meaning of the famous saying was being taught on the giant screens projected onto South Lawn. I may not approve of what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it. Perhaps the most impressive thing about that day was the extraordinary level of respect and character that we all showed. There were debates and rallies, protests and counter-protests and counter-counter-protests that made me wonder how many Columbia students it really takes to screw in a light bulb. But at the end of the day, roommates standing on opposite sides of the issue could get together to discuss the day's events over dinner in John Jay. For me, that is the kind of connection that is invoked every time someone gives salam. It's a show of peace and goodwill, regardless of affiliation, that ties a community together. As we prepare to leave the communities that we've created here at Columbia, we carry the tools to forge these relationships among the new people we meet. Never forget the different communities that we've been a part of in our time here, the different communities that we will be a part of and intersect with, and the ways of thinking about and overcoming conflict that we've developed. These qualities are what make us global citizens of the Columbia community. Being part of this community is unique, and that feeling at home at Columbia makes you at home with the world. Thank you.
The thinkers engraved on the stones of Butler Library have become a familiar sight to us. They are a quiet but intimidating community which ushered us into our college years. They challenged me to read, to think, and most importantly, to act. They insisted that we reach into the literature of the past in order to shape our lives and futures. These days, the words of Micah the prophet speak to my heart. He has told you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah's charge is directed towards the individual. The search for justice, mercy, and humility is ultimately the lonely responsibility of every human being on earth. However, it is impossible to pursue these goals alone. At Columbia, I have learned that the impact of justice, righteousness, and humility is more powerful when a community strives for them together. The power of numbers and multiplicity of identity yield great results in this world. The question is how to find community. Is it in the library? In class? We have spent countless hours in the library. We have poured through books and written hundreds of pages. We've connected with each other over ideas, and we've connected with civilizations and communities through the collective memories of history. We have found that the journey through college has not just been an academic one. The classroom is only the seat of education. We have learned to translate knowledge and theory into practice only by engaging the different layers of communities here on campus. When I entered Barnard College, community for me was defined by the Syrian Jewish community in which I was raised. Growing up, my identity was formed by family, synagogue, school, and camps. Within days of my arrival at Barnard, my first-year dorm, Cells Reed 2, became my community. The circles of Hillel, Yavna, Alternative Spring Break, and SGA added layers to my identity on campus. At Columbia, my communities overlap and interlock. Over the course of a single day, I live in many circles. Some are intimate and some are vast. Some circles are homogeneous based on culture and religion, and others unite a diverse group of individuals committed passionately to a cause, as in Take Back the Night. Some of my communities merged and some of them clashed. The beauty of a place like Columbia is that it helps us combine all of these identities and reach out to broader communities. This may be the only time in our lives when so many different parts of our identities coexist under one roof. The Columbia Barnard Hillel echoes this theme. It houses a wide range of religious, cultural, political, and social groups. The Craft Center is a home for religious development, for social justice advocacy, for Torah study. I go to Craft for prayer services, to hear a great lecture, and to have a good time. Columbia has allowed me to live a life with many layers. The facets of identity were constantly in flux, moving with the ebb and flow of my life. It took some time to adjust to the multiplicity that had become my life at Barnard, an adjustment that I shared with many of my classmates and through which I made many of my friends at college. Learning how to juggle communities was an integral part of my 4-year journey at college. Forgiveness, flexibility, and creativity were vital parts to this process. These qualities helped me permanently incorporate these different layers into an identity which I hope to nurture beyond my time at Columbia. Community has the power to nurture, but can also be dangerously isolating. Community inspires our own growth, but may keep us isolated from humanity. Most recently, we as Columbia students were called upon to mobilize as a community and reach out to the people of Haiti. When the earthquake struck, we were on winter break. The students of Columbia University were dispersed throughout the world. President Bollinger emailed the student body reminding us that we are part of the community of humanity. We came together to mobilize and to send help. The response on campus was overwhelming. Communities are created in moments of shared historical memory, uniting people who live through events and experiences. The election of Barack Obama last year created such a community. As I ran out of my building that night, I was overwhelmed by the emotional commotion on the streets. I remember the deep sense of connection in our neighborhood. Together, students, our neighbors in Morningside Heights, and the rest of New York City forged a memory of this enormous moment in American history. Community building is not always seamless. For a week, the joint coalition between Hillel and the Columbia College C's Office of Multicultural Affairs became part of a community in New Orleans affected by Hurricane Katrina. We formed our own community based on the values of social justice and multiculturalism while learning about the people we would be joining in New Orleans. The joining of communities entailed many hours of identity exploration. We pushed to think through and beyond the multiple facets of ourselves. We spent the months before and the week of spring break trying to understand New Orleans and the impacts of Katrina. It was vital to understand what it meant to be a part of that community. When we arrived, we stretched our hearts to appreciate the unique realities of their lives. For a week, we did service work and tried to make a difference in this corner of the world. As I think back to the philosophers of Butler Library, I wonder, what do they think of the class of 2010? With our laptops and our diversity, we've created a new community, incubating our identities. They have watched over us for 4 years. Their writings have challenged us, and we've grappled with applying their ideas to a new world. Together with the prophet Micah, they ask us to make the world a better place. I'm intimidated by these expectations. However, I know that our time here will serve as good preparation and that our community here will always serve as a backbone to support us in the future. I would like to take this moment to thank my family, my friends, my teachers, and mentors. Thank you for an incredible 4 years of learning and laughter, tears, and everything in between. To Mom, Dad, Sarah, Ovadia, Gavi, and Mordechai, my constant sources of support through this challenging and exciting adventure called life. And to Micah, my #1 fan, I cannot thank you all enough. Congratulations to all.
Let us stand for a moment of silence. And in this moment of silence, I ask that you think of those things for which you are grateful, think of those people to whom you are grateful, and give God thanks. Amen. Let us sing together our recessional hymn, which is printed on your program, the alma mater.